Okay, thank you. We have a few people coming in just from the outside, but I think we'll go ahead and start because we really have an exciting and packed schedule today. I'm thrilled to see everybody. This is a second big meeting I've had this week, and it's great everybody's back and in person. And maybe it's the subject matter, but it's also maybe we feel we're coming out of COVID and everybody's meeting in person. But it's good to see you all. I'm Steve Lommel. I'm the Associate Dean for Research and the Experiment Station Director here in the College of Ag and Life Sciences at NC State. And I'm here just to provide a few words of welcome. I won't take much time because we want to get straight to the science, but very excited about what Ricardo and is doing here, and also with Deborah putting this together, one of our research showcases. We have a number of these. Maybe some of you folks come to more than one, but this one's on controlled environment agriculture and the Research Emerging Showcase. And we're very excited about this. We are here to kind of put a stake in the ground in this arena. We're very excited with the Plant Sciences Initiative and a lot of other things we're doing. We have a lot of facilities. And the agriculture in the state and the state of North Carolina itself, I think, is very conducive to this area. We're an urban state. Our population is one that is expanding significantly, and a lot of those people are moving to the urban areas. So local foods and these kind of things are a major deal. Also, vertical farming is a major opportunity here as well. So we have those kind of opportunities. We also are a specialty crop state. There's over 90 different commodity groups in the state, and we probably grow over 90 different kinds of crops, and they're specialty crops. They're the kind of crops that people actually eat above and beyond corn, soybeans, cotton, and these kind of things. And we have breeding programs for a lot of these. So that's the environmental sciences, the controlled chambers and things like this that will really do a lot to accelerate a number of these breeding programs. We can do a lot of phenotyping and controlled environments that allow our breeders to select very quickly for new traits and things like that to accelerate our breeding programs. So we're, again, that's another aspect of it. And then also we're sort of at the cutting edge of climate change with being a coastal state and hurricanes and things like that. And again, looking for resiliency in our production systems. So again, controlled environment chambers and controlled environment sciences will be very valuable in replicating these climate change issues at small scale. So again, we can rapidly phenotype, test hypothesis, and do physiology on a number of our plant species. So again, as the research director, I'm very excited about the controlled environment opportunities that are going on here, and with Ricardo and other leaders in the college you're going to hear from. We really are wanting to invest and do a lot more research in this area. This fits the theme of our college with the Plant Sciences Initiative, budding animal initiative as well. Our Plants for Human Health Institute down at Kannapolis and the North Carolina Food Innovation Lab, which again are all working on fruits and vegetables that people eat. And again, we're looking at a lot of growing these things in controlled environments and also doing research on them. I could say more. Deborah's given me more talking points, but for the sake of brevity, I just want to welcome you all here, and I think we're going to have a great day today, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Adrian Percy, who's the director of the Plant Sciences Initiative. Adrian.
Thanks,
Yeah.
I'm also going to add just a layer of welcome as well to this group, and so I'm super excited to see you all here. I've actually been at NC State now almost a year, so 50 weeks, a couple of weeks till I got my first year anniversary. And one of the first things I remember doing is having a coffee on Hillsborough Street with Deborah and Ricardo and starting to plot this whole thing and decide, to go ahead with this workshop. So it's great that we finally got here, and we've got such a terrific audience from across campus, but also with a lot of external partners. So welcome, welcome, welcome. For those of you who are not familiar with the Plant Sciences Initiative, you're in the Plant Sciences building, as you probably gathered. This is the new shiny building on campus. We only opened in April. We had faculty moving in May and June, and now we have 25 different research programs in this building, but the Plant Sciences Initiative actually spreads beyond the walls of this building, and we have faculty based in a number of colleges and departments across the university. The ethos of the Plant Sciences Initiative is really to do interdisciplinary research in the plant sciences. It's to bring together not just the plant biologists, the agronomists, the ag economists, but also the engineers, the data scientists, and others to work on project-based science and to really focus on some of the big challenges that we have in agriculture. And I have to say, I think controlled environment ag fits so nicely into that whole philosophy. If you think about, the needs that we have from a hardware, a software, and a plant biology standpoint, when you think of controlled environment ag, I think what we're doing here at the Plant Sciences Initiative really fits into that. And so I'm excited that Ricardo hopefully will be moving actually into this building himself before too long with his team, and will add to the community that we're building within this building and beyond. So with that, I welcome you again. I'm going to hand over to Erin Meyer.
Hello, everyone. I represent the philanthropic side of research. And so my colleague, Dinah Schuster, who's the Senior Director of Development, and I work to bring philanthropic resources to the university. And so as you listen to the presentations today, I ask you to think about ways that you might invest further in some of the research that is important and some of the topic areas around that is important to controlled environmental agriculture. And when we think about philanthropic resources, we're talking about people, places, and programs. And so people are the students, the faculty members. These are the engines of research to make transformational change in agriculture. Places are this building. It's a wonderful building that is going to be, this building will foster the interdisciplinary research interactions and collaborations that are necessary. And then programs, these are endowments, professorships, and other investments that have longevity. So if you want to learn more, feel free to talk to me or Dinah. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ricardo Hernandez, who's the Associate Professor of Horticultural Science.
Thank you, Erin. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the reception. That's it. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Ricardo Hernandez, and I'm an Associate Professor here at the university. And I'm the Director of the Control Environment Coalition, and you get to learn more about that. Before I start my presentation, I want to say thank you to all of you for attending. Also, I want to say thank you to Deborah Thompson, because she not only helped me put this event together, but she also has reached out to many of you, and it's actually helped me to get this coalition off the ground. So I'm going to do a little clap for Deborah. Yeah. She's going to hate me for this, but also thank you very much to the PSI staff for putting this together. And thank you very much for my panelists. And you get to learn more why they have a VIP table, right? They actually pay to be here, not like you, they're here for free. Just kidding. And then I'll introduce them in a minute. Great. So I'm going to talk about the Controlled Environment Coalition at NC State. So the mission and vision of this coalition is to take multidisciplinary expertise and have them work in the area of controlled environment to solve the grand challenges in controlled environment, right? But the other mission that we have is we're trying to get creative on how to work with the industry members. We want to be agile to bring industry members into the mix so we can actually offer tangible short-term and long-term benefits for our partners. So there's three main pillars around this coalition, right? We have the expertise, and then we have the infrastructure, shiny new building, right? And then we have industry-driven approach, industry focus. And that's what makes this Controlled Environment Coalition. So let me talk about the expertise within this coalition. And I think the best way to do this is try to explain to you how the university works, okay? 7 years here, still learning how. Steve, you're doing a great job teaching me, but a lot to catch up. So you have the university, right? The University of North Carolina has the main institution, for higher education. Within that, you have colleges. Here, I'll just give you 3 examples of these colleges, right? But there's a total of 10 or 11 colleges, depending if you cut the graduate school has a college. But we have around 10 colleges in the university. So we have 3 listed here just as an example. Now, within those colleges, you have departments, right? I'm part of the Department of Horticulture, And I'm going to pick on that just because I'm part of it, right? And within the department, you have different expertise, areas of expertise, right? And these are some examples of those, right? That is not only true for the Department of Horticulture, but all the departments within the colleges. This is just an example of 3 under the College of Ag, but there is a total of 68 departments in the university, right? So that is also true for other colleges. They have their own departments, and each department has its own level of expertise, right? Now, we are very good at collaborating within our department, right? We actually talk to each other most of the time, right? And we try to generate projects and research and outputs, right? And then we're getting better and better at collaborating with other departments within our college, right? But our administration gave us the challenge to actually start collaborating across the university, across the institution. So that's what we're trying to do with this coalition. Controlled environment is unique because you have a combination of sciences, right? You have your plant physiology, you have your data, you have your computer, you have your engineering, you have all these sciences around growing plants that actually makes controlled environment one of the good examples for multidisciplinary collaboration. So therefore, we have reached out to expertise across the university that cover different areas around controlled environment, right? Including plant sciences, molecular biology, a lot of engineering, economics, marketing, advanced materials, sensors and controllers, education and outreach, right? And this is just example. Now, this is not an exclusive club, right? Any faculty that wants to participate in this coalition is welcome to, because we're trying to actually create those possibilities for collaboration and innovation. You're actually going to hear great presentations today about some of the faculty. And you're going to realize that the expertise is so unique and powerful that I'm not really much of a director. I'm more like a coordinator, right? Because I typically, these expertise are run so deep and strong within this coalition. Infrastructure, that's the second thing, right? So we have unique infrastructure in controlled environment here at NC State. One way is the phytotron, and actually phytotron has long history here at the university, and I think the director is sitting among us. And the phytotron is a unique facility. I actually went and counted all these chambers, and I realized that they were listed in the website, but I still took a wide through every floor of the phytotron. There is around 63 growth chambers in this building, right? So these growth chambers have been used historically to provide access to scientists to grow and do research year round. But now that we're here in the coalition, we have been working with the phytotron to actually do controlled environment research within the phytotron, right? There's only 2 or 3 like this in the nation, right? 2, is it 2, 3, 2, 2, only 2 left, right? So this university is lucky to have one of them, right? The pictures of the phytotron infrastructure. Now you're sitting here in the Plant Science Initiative Institute building, right? So this building is unique. We have state of the art. If you want to have a tour later today, Deborah will be able to give you a tour, and you get to see what's special about this building. But let me tell you more about it. What makes me excited about this building, right? We have a greenhouse on the top, and which is a rooftop greenhouse. It just looks like a common greenhouse if you're not a controlled environment aficionado. But actually, this greenhouse, every single compartment is controlled by a refrigeration system, right? So using HVAC technology to control a greenhouse that is absorbing solar radiation, right? So that's amazing. Why? Because you can do controlled environment research. You can actually simulate environment anywhere in the US or the world in every single of those compartments, right? So that gives a unique capabilities to this coalition, which is rare in the US, has a possibility. So not only you have a air control, you also have light control, you have light color control, and all within the reach of the Controlled Environment College. This is how the greenhouse looks inside, and it's a treat to be in there. Yes. We also have some unique grow chambers. You're probably familiar to grow chambers, where these ones are a little more special, right? This is a little more special because you can take a group of plants, we'll call it a canopy, and stick it in the grow chamber, right? And not only grow the plants like you do in any grow chamber, but this actually grow chamber is measuring real time what the plant is doing in terms of photosynthesis, respiration and transpiration. So you make a change in the environment, you see the instant response of a community of plants inside the chamber, right? Now, we plant physiologists like to do this with a little expensive machine, and we can clip a little piece of a leaf and get information out of it. But we realize that that doesn't extrapolate to what the whole plant is doing, much less extrapolates to what the entire canopy is doing. So this allows us to measure that. I think there's 8 chambers like this in the world. We have 4 here. Oh, yeah, this is 4, right? We have 4. So unique infrastructure. We have the horticultural science department, and the greenhouse, they are a little bit different. Those are more commercial based. Those are more your typical pad and fan greenhouses. So we can translate that take results from here to actually applicable to actually commercial based greenhouses that are not going to refrigerate, the entire greenhouse with HVAC systems. So we can do that transition, right? We have light quality grow chambers. We have greenhouse outfitted with supplemental lighting, temperature, different ways to irrigate and control irrigation and actually measure transpiration rate of every single plant real time, right? And then we have a large numbers of research stations, right? So the NC Cooperative Extension actually have a research stations almost in every county. You can see the little red dots in there. So no, controlled environment is not only about growing food in a controlled environment, but it's also serving the open field production, right? That's what we're trying to do here. We want to be part of the solution. We don't want to, display any other already successful horticultural techniques, right? So our North Carolina extension system is one of the most developed in the universities, right? So that's 2 so far, right? Expertise and infrastructure. So hopefully by now you're saying, hey, the NC State is a good place to do controlled environment research. But we also want to be industry driven, right? We want to find ways to work with the industry with higher agility, right? And we've been brainstorming, actually talking to industry members when we were developing these ways to collaborate. And we found a few ways that we think may work for most of the industry members. One that is very excited about is the membership model, right? This is a pre-competitive collaboration, right? We have industry members that are excited to solve the grand challenges of controlled environment, and they want to work with the NC State Coalition, right? And then they have to contribute financially with different tiers of membership fees. That goes to one pool of money, and then members and faculty get to pick which project we want to focus on first. Then we use the research for that project to then use those results and leverage to get more dollars, with bigger grants, right? So here in this membership approach, we have a membership that is contributed with funds, but also advice as part of the advisory council. We have all the university collaborators. We're not exclusive. We have donations and gifts, and perhaps some grants to create that transformative research that may change. Another way to collaborate with the industry is on one-on-one research collaboration. And most of you from the industry perhaps are familiar with this way of collaborating, right? We have industry has a challenge or a problem, and they have the money, right? But they want to leverage the expertise and the infrastructure of the university, right? But it's important to notice that they also want to take advantage of the intellectual property, right? Or whatever IP can be generated, right? So therefore, we have other ways to collaborate one-on-one, where we bring that challenge and that funding, we bring the expertise and infrastructure, and we deliver research results, but also we deliver ways for that collaborator to gain competitive advantage through the securement of IP, right? Another way is service agreements, right? This is, for example, some of you in the industry have hired very versed scientists, and they pretty much know what they need to do to get specific results, but they want to leverage our infrastructure and our technical personnel, right? So we can engage in service agreements where you tell us exactly the experiment that you want to run, and then we run it and we deliver those results back to you, right? Obviously for a fee, right? So this is a different type of collaboration. It requires less intellectual contribution for us here at the NC State, but also delivers a value to the industry. Okay? So let me give you a couple of examples. Okay. So this is a strawberry propagation, right? So a few years ago, we actually used a little bit of startup money when I got here, and then we used a little bit of some industry donations, and we created, we collaborated with the Phytotron, and we actually got a few chambers outfitted to propagate strawberries indoors, not to grow fruit, but to grow clones, right? We had this idea that maybe we can do it better, right? Then we got very cool results, and I got to see with other faculty at NC State, including Dr. Mark Hoffman, he should be here in the audience, and we started brainstorming how is this valuable for the industry? Well, we actually find out that propagating strawberries outdoors right now is a big challenge with a lot of problems. So we took this initial data and other data from other labs at NC State that was actually funded through, donations, gifts, and startup, and we leveraged that to actually get a grant, right? To get a $5.3 million grant, and now we're actually working on revolutionizing the way strawberries are propagated, right? So now this grant has multiple institutions, multiple universities, and in Florida, California, North Carolina, and other states. So that's an example how we leverage the industry support to actually go for the bigger dollars. Let me give you another sample for one-to-one research collaborations, right? So here, this project was funded through a company, through an SBRI funding. And then doing one-on-one research collaboration, actually, we created some IP, right? So the company, NC State and the company together did this work together, and now this IP is exclusively licensed to this company. And now they're using it to open new facilities across the United States, right? That's another example where one-on-one research collaboration actually led to tangible benefits to the industry. So I want to thank our current industry partners, right? Through this showcase, we hope to get that membership pool bigger so we can actually fund more students who are the actually that do all the work. I just get to talk about it and get some take some credit, but I don't do the work. But these are the list of current industry partners and current funding agencies of our officially launched today showcase. Okay, and this is we have a website, right? So if you we have a video on the website, if you're not tired of my lovely French accent, you can watch the video and learn more about the coalition. So make sure to scan it. I'm going to leave it there for a minute. I see nobody's using it, so I'm going to wait until you guys do. But that's what I have. Yes. Any questions? No questions. Okay. So question back there. Yes. Yes. Yeah, so when in the one-on-one research collaboration, there is a negotiation that is done in advance. So going even before the research starts, there is a negotiation. I just get to sign the paper, they negotiate, and then with the terms around that negotiation. With the membership, that's a good question, right? It's how are we going to manage that IP? And actually, Deborah was educating me on that, right? So depending on the level of membership and depending which projects you want to be involved, there may be the opportunity for the company to negotiate some IP rights in advance. But that typically gets negotiated. There are some companies that just want to look and just want to see what's going on, right? So that's a entry level membership fee. There's some companies that actually want to gain from that IP, right? So because we have a variety of projects and a variety of opportunities, we're trying to just make it fit. Yes. Question in the back, please. Yeah, right. So we maybe not tomorrow, but yes. So we're trying to make it very agile, right? So that's one of our goals within this coalition. We want to make it fast. We want to make it a little faster, right? To be able to move, depending on the project. Obviously, if it's a project a little that requires more IP protection, it's going to get a little bit more time to get off the ground, right? Because so that negotiation has to happen in advance. But the university has done this for many, many, many years. So they have also streamlined that process, but it will take more time, right? A service agreement, we can start right away. If we have the space, we can start it right away, right? We have the space, we have the personnel, we can start it right away. And a membership, that's a more organized way of working, right? There's actually, it will be an actually members and faculty meeting and decides which areas of focus we want to go for. And it's more of a democratized decision. Yeah. We're trying to get fast, yes. Excellent, yeah. Yes, the question is, when are the first outcomes coming out of the coalition? And also when I'm doing these negotiations to make sure we highlight NC State contribution and branding. Let me answer your second question first. I have no inclusion in these negotiations because I will probably make a mistake, right? So there is a group of people that actually are hired just to do that, right? So we fully trust on it. And then the first outcomes, right? So we're doing outcomes, some of the partners who are actually working right now, right? And generating outputs right now, right? We have a couple that are service agreements that are going to start next week. There is some that are midways actually that we're delivering the project reports, right? In terms of IP, we have a few projects that are IP related, and they're close to conclusion. And right now, the companies are actually assessing if they want to pursue the IP route. So, and the overall goal is to have fun and make impact. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, sir. To do that. Yeah. Any other questions? Harumi?
Have the expertise in the coalition, like if a company would like certain type of expertise, how are you going to influence that?
So first look within the university. And if it's not there, then look to our partners outside the university. Yeah. How do we work that administrative? Right, we're still working on that. We have some close partners around the USA that work in controlled environment that we work well with. So we're trying to find ways to actually make this a little bigger than NC State, right? Yeah, but this is the first step. Great question, Herman. Yes, great question. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of bookkeeping, right? You see some balloons over there? We have a yellow balloon and a red balloon. So basically, for the faculty speakers, if you see the yellow balloon, it means you have 2 minutes to finish your presentation. If you see the red balloon, means stop. Okay, so finish your sentence. Okay, so Lebra is going to manage that. So when you don't pretend you see it because everybody else is going to see it. Okay, and then second one, I want to introduce the panel. Right, so most of them came out of town. Also, my main speakers came out of town. So thank you for that. But I asked them to prepare 30 seconds for an introduction. So I'm going to start over here. And we have Nick Genti, who is the CEO of Agai Technologies. Nick?
CEO of Agai Technologies. We platform for control environment ag, focus on all types of control environment, facility agnostic, plant agnostic, looking at harnessing ways to increase the yield, increase the characteristics of high value crops.
Melinda, please.
Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Hernandez. I am a professor in the horticultural science department, and my research specialization is in consumer perception. So I'm basically doing research on consumer marketing, on what their behavior is, their attitudes, and how we can what influence it. So happy to be here.
Hans.
Hello, everyone. Hans Stahls with Current Lighting. We are a lighting manufacturer for greenhouse and vertical farm, and we provide solutions for that. My specific role, I'm a plant scientist for the company, and I coordinate research with institutions such as NC State, internationally, globally, with other institutes around the world to come up with cutting edge solutions for growing anything and everything in the greenhouse conditions or vertical farm conditions.
Harumi.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Yoshi from Bright Farms. I'm the Senior Director of R&D, and my role is to look for early innovation to find solutions for leafy greens in greenhouses. California.
And you're probably wondering why they're facing me and not you if it's a panel, right? So it's a slightly different panel. This is a Shark Tank panel. I don't know if we can say that, but so their role here is to question the presenters, especially the faculty and the students, to try to get out of them, how is this applicable to the industry, right? So that's their mission, to ask the questions to the presenters, right? So that's why they're facing this way, okay? So with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Brian Jackson from the horticultural department. Oh, no, not yet. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, we have two invited speakers that actually came from out of town, right? We have John Wright from the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research. And then John, welcome to the stage. Yes. Thank you, Deborah. Yes.
I had no idea about this Shark Tank situation. It's going to be interesting. Well, I'm going to try to go through these slides pretty quick. Just want to introduce Catherine Maxwell, who I know a lot of y'all know here. If you have any questions about anything about FAR, because I'm going to go through things relatively quickly, you can ask her or me after the event. All right. So I'm here to talk about what FAR's efforts are in controlled environment agriculture. So if a lot of you don't know who FAR is, well, first of all, I'm John Reich and I work at FAR. I work on the science team and I largely work in urban food systems, but across disciplines sometimes. So FAR is a research funding agency. We are given money from the government to fund research across the food and agricultural sector. The one caveat that we have is that in order to fund research, we need to have matching support from an outside US federal source. So that means that if FAR spends $1 on research funding, that we have to have $1 coming from a non-US federal source, and that could be anybody. That could be the foreign governments, it can be state, local governments, and they can be companies, just the whole gamut. And I want to just say that that doesn't mean that we don't partner with the US federal government. We do partner with the US federal government. However, their funds can't unlock our funds. And so that's a really important part of what we do. And an important part of that is building collaborative partnerships to support scientific research. So that's part of our mission. Our vision is listed here, and I'm just going to read it off the slide. We envision a world in which pioneering collaborative science provides every person access to affordable, nutritious food grown on thriving farms. And we fund across multiple areas, which we call challenge areas. So everything from crops to health to animal systems, urban food systems, which I manage, water and soil health. So these are our major foci at FAR. We do focus on other stuff, but in terms of our large projects, they are around our challenge areas. Sorry if I'm going really fast. I just have a decent amount of topics to cover in these 10 minutes. All right. So this is the last slide about FAR in general. FAR, we have multiple funding mechanisms about how we work. So one is we have competitive grants. If you're a faculty member, you're very familiar with what competitive grants are. We can do direct funds, which means that if there's a challenge that we think is important and there's an expertise where it's relatively rare to have that expertise, we can do a direct award from that. We also do prizes. And the other lot of as we build these consortia. So consortia, in terms at least what I do, are funding consortia, which means we bring partners to pull resources, and those resources then go to fund projects that are decided by the partnerships. All right, so I'll dive into why we're all here today, and for CEA, basically, Controlled Environment Agriculture. And when we first got into this space, which seems like years ago, with some of the people actually in this room, Chris Higgins, who was talking after me, I believe, we heard a lot about what the benefits of CEA could potentially be, right? So you can use less land to produce X amount of product, less water, less chemicals, and then the proximity to an area. So that proximity really means you can produce a high quality product, right? That's nutritious to consumers that are nearby them. And then we heard a lot about what the obstacles are. And so when we first got into the space, the obstacles were largely around energy production, but then there were also obstacles around plants. And when we first got into the space, a lot of funding agencies were focused on the plant aspects of this. And so we decided that that's what we wanted to go after. So we created, so one of our foci in controlled environment agriculture is crop adaptation. We created a consortium that's also called PIP, different than Ricardo's PIP, but it stands for Precision Indoor Plants. And so this is a public-private partnership, right? And so we brought partners in. The partners decided to fund research at a certain level and determine what research topics we were interested in. And for us, it was about, again, adapting crops to these indoor systems, where we largely focus on things like architecture of crops for these systems, and then phytochemical production as it relates to nutrition and things like flavor. This slide is really text heavy, but you can see that this is a pre-competitive funding consortium, and we have partners who These are the partners that we pull funding with. So when it says PIP partners, those are the partners who bring a certain amount of money every year into the consortium, and then we divvy up between projects. And then we have other partners, and these other partners are co-funding projects with us. So when our industry collaborators do research on this project, which they are on the first one on the left side, which is a Leafy Green project, and we did that really just to try to get some quick wins and get a project out the door. They share data between each other through a mechanism that we have with the University of Minnesota. And then if they're doing that research, we also want them to be able, or we want FAR to be able to release that data, the high quality data that they're generating, so that others can then build on top of that to answer novel scientific questions. And so we are working on that. And as you can imagine, with all the talks around data, that can be pretty complicated, but we are working on that. So our first project is on leafy greens, and they're working on what they decided to work on, which is post-consumer trait, browning and pinking. So discoloration. They're also looking at accelerated growth without tip burn. Two things not mentioned here is that they're looking at speed breeding as well. And they're also looking at, they're using microbial volatile organic compounds, a specific one, to accelerate growth. So getting products in less time, using less light, et cetera. The second project is largely done by Wageningen and a collection of Netherlands, Dutch universities, where all these other partners, where it says other partners are co-funding, and it's called Sky High. They're largely focused on 4 crops: lettuce again, strawberries, potatoes, and basil. And our portion of that project really is to tip burn again, speed breeding, photoperiod and deal cycle, and then they're focusing on much, much more outside of that. Our third project that we announced was largely focused on tomato. And so what we wanted to do is create a tomato variety that can fit into indoor systems, but that was also extremely flavorful. So that's what we're working on. So that's largely being run by Harry Klee and Denise Tiemann, who are flavor experts in tomatoes, partnering with Leo Marcellus at Wageningen and Robert Jenkinson at UC Riverside on that. And the last project that we hope will be announced this year from this is that we had a competitive RFA on creating premium flavors in strawberry. And so these aren't the typical strawberry flavors that we're thinking about. They're really novel flavors, so you can create a premium product in indoor environments. And so we hope to announce who the researchers are going to be in that. I'm hoping this month, maybe next month, but negotiating agreements take some time. But we think it's going to be a really exciting project, and we'll hopefully announce that soon. So the second area of foci for us in controlled environment agriculture really is looking at, and I've been thinking about this for a while, but now we're starting to develop it out more, is how do these production systems integrate into regional environments? And this really comes at a time where I think the industry is really talking a lot about sustainability. And a lot of the conversations that we hear are focused on using renewable energy for this. So energy is a huge problem in this space, right? It helps make it not economically viable. And a lot of people are talking about wind and solar power. And so we all know that wind and solar power as renewable energy sources can vary. You know, you can get the amount of energy they produce varies depending on the time of year, depending on the time of day, depending on climate conditions. And so that makes it hard. And it's also really context specific. So if you were to try to power a production facility in place X versus place Y, you might have to take more land, actually, if you were just powering by solar power or wind power, right? And so it is very context specific. Then we also know that there are a number of organizations or efforts that are trying to decouple it from the power grid, where they're trying just to develop their own power from technologies like anaerobic digesters or others like that. And that's great. And we fully support those types of efforts. And then the last one I wanted to mention, highlight, is that we know that a lot of groups are trying to integrate these into buildings, so residential buildings in other countries, right? So taking the heat that's developed from a production system and then using it for residential heating. So we completely support all these types of projects and think that they need to happen and hope that they continue to happen. Oh, did I do something? Okay. But this kind of next area that I'm talking about is that we're really looking to see, can CEA produce positive environmental impacts? So when we're talking about all these other things, we're talking about reducing environmental impacts, but we want to know, can CEA produce positive environmental impacts? And how we're looking at this is moving beyond production systems and actually this integration into regional environments. So I created this diagram here, which shows this production system at the top as part of a system, a regional type system, right? What you can see at the bottom, environment and land use. So that's what that's supposed to represent. And we know that with every system like this, we have outputs that are going out. So waste, products that consumers buy, heat, a number of other things. And we know that from the environment, we get things like energy, water, nutrients, and a number of other things. And so we think that we need to ensure that that we need to begin thinking about how those are integrated with one another. And that's our kind of next research effort that we're moving into. So this is my last slide, or well, it's my last slide on a science topic, and then I'll just review the summary. So when we're thinking about how you integrate these into regional environments, we're really thinking about this transition to a green economy that we hear a lot of people talking about. So we know that there's knowledge and technological advancements are occurring across multiple domains, some of which I have listed here. So there's the energy, there's circular bioeconomy, things are happening in the water sector, nature-based solutions. So things are occurring across multiple domains to enable transition to a greener economy. These technologies often exist in silos, at least from what I understand this sector. And we believe that adopting or enabling technologies across sectors can produce synergistic effects that promote new ways of doing business and new business models that lead to economic viability of these different areas, including CEA. So that I talked about integration into regional environments. If you want to talk about this more, you can talk to me after or Catherine Maxwell at the end. Thank you.
So next, no, you're good. Yeah. Next, I like to introduce Chris Higgins. Chris is not only a one of the leaders in the industry, and he's also a good friend of mine. So Chris.
All right, Ricardo, thank you for having me. As we get this talk started, which one am I using here? There we go. I want to go over a little bit why they invited me, why I think Ricardo invited me, but also say that as compared to John's conversation, mine are going to come from really a small business that's trying to be competitive in a global space. So some of my comments, while they're very similar to what John said, we'll also think about how I look at competition in the space and how I look at building up a US industry versus some of the things that are happening globally. So who am I? Who are we? So my name's Chris. As Ricardo said, I've been in the controlled environment ag space since 2003, focused mainly on greenhouse vegetable production for that entire time. In 2008, we started a company called Hort Americas. At Hort Americas, we're kind of a distribution company. However, we're not a very good distribution company because in our space, what we've had to do is really limit the amount of products we sell, because every time we sell something, it comes with a lot of technical service. So a good distribution company would be somebody like Amazon. Amazon, who has bricks and mortars, their logistics are amazing. You place an order, you get it. But if you try to call for technical support, the best thing they're going to say is, we'll send it back, we'll send you a new one. With Hort Americas, it's a little bit different from us. If we sell you something and you call us, we end up having to hold your hand to learning how to use it for many of the growers we work with. So that's why I say we're not a very good distributor. We're kind of some kind of cross between a distributor and a manufacturer. So in less than 10 minutes, what I'm going to try to cover is, what do I think we as the industry need? Why do we need it? And what is the best ways to achieve it? So number one, I think we need to deliver on our goals of sustainability. And why do I say that? Our industry has raised a lot of capital from investment companies and from the ESG portfolio of those investment companies. But in some cases, we're starting to see now, as we come into an energy crisis, where we're kind of failing in some of that. So there was an article out maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago in the UK. That's the article I'm referred to here with in the Guardian, where about 100 hectares of cucumber greenhouses are shutting down because they either are struggling to deal with increased labor costs, they're struggling to deal with increased energy costs, or the land is simply more valuable to be for housing. So the way I look at this is say, okay, we've spent the last decade promoting the fact that we're going to feed the future as we go through climate change, as we go through all these other things, and we run into our first roadblock, energy crisis, and we crumble. So what are we really saying? If investors are really looking at our industry carefully, how do they look at an article like this and look at what we're actually capable of doing if we read the other side of the, the marketing that's out there and look at feeding the future in 2050. So I think from my perspective as an industry and as a coalition, as we're trying to create here, we need to make sure that if we're going to promote something, we can deliver on that. And if we're going to how are we going to deliver on that? And it's my opinion that it's going to be very difficult for any one company to do all these things by themselves. So that's for me the need number one. Need number two, development of a workforce. This one is really, really important. And for anybody in here who's running a greenhouse or a vertical farm, they know how difficult it's been to find labor. There's been a lot of different ideas of where the labor is coming from, but most importantly, we need people that know how to run these systems. If we're challenging or we're moving towards the idea of adopting AI, well, we need people that know how to program the systems to grow the crops we're growing on a production level. So a lot of these things, we're kind of put the cart way before the horse, but we're starting to see, and this is a research paper that's out there from Wageningen University. I believe it was published in 2020. I should have wrote that down, sorry. But really globally, they're seeing that as international companies are coming to the US to build these facilities, they're trying to figure out where we're going to hire the workforce from. Historically, if you go back to when I got in the industry, a Dutch greenhouse company would export a package to the United States. And with that package, they would export a couple of Dutch guys to run the facility. Then we would hire a bunch of Hispanics. They would do all the real work. The Dutch guys would boss everybody around. And then that's how the industry existed for so many years. Now we're in a place where that is definitely changing. We're running out of people who want to come to the United States. And we're not necessarily giving the right opportunities to promote those individuals that at those facilities to actually now run those facilities. So we're at a crossroads here when it comes to how we're going to put people to work within the space. Again, another promise that we're making when we're out there fundraising for capital. Third, for me, this one is probably the closest home for me, is the focus on developing technology that is purpose-driven. We have spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I know from talking to other people in the room, they know I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. They know that I'm constantly reading and looking for what other companies are developing. And what I see with a lot of this stuff is things that may work 10, 15, 20 years in the future. But we have a lot of farms that are operating today that have problems that they need to solve today. And we've got a bit of a gap. Where's the technology? How are we going to use new technology to get us from point A to point Z, which is kind of, we're trying to bridge this gap with some of this new technology that we're developing. So for me, purpose-driven technology at the right and proper price points is also extremely important. When you take all of these three issues as a whole, this is why I'm so focused on the collaborative efforts, because I don't believe that any one organization can do this by themselves. And I also don't believe that if we who are trying to do this here locally, and by locally, I mean anywhere in North America, I don't believe if we don't take the opportunity to come together and solve these problems, I know that there are people right around the corner ready to do it. I know that this organization here, the Dutch Greenhouse Delta, has been in this state 6 times in the last year, trying to take the money that the group here is trying to raise to bring to this university, trying to take that money and take that money back to a different area because they need this investment as well. And so we know that we're in a competitive race to be able to build the industry that I hope we can build selfishly to support my company, selfishly to support my customers so they can keep buying stuff from me, and so I know we're in a competitive situation. I also know that this is something that we can do and we've proven that we can do when we're working together. So in 2020, with Hans's company, we worked with, at the time, GE Current to solve a problem for a grower, which meant making LED grow lights, not in Asia, but here in the United States, and more specifically in North Carolina. So we converted an LED street light facility, if you will, into a facility that could produce greenhouse lighting in Hendersonville. So the idea that we can bring these resources together, that we can build it here in the United States, and we can build it here locally to service directly the needs of the North American grower. I mean, it can be done, but it does take a collaborative effort. There wasn't one company involved in this process that could have done it without their partners. So I promised Ricardo I'd go really fast, but for me, this is what I think we need. This is why I want to support the efforts here and the coalition. And I'm hoping that we can come together as an industry to kind of strengthen everybody and allow us to all do our jobs better.
Thank you, Chris. I'm gonna ask Chris to stay here for a minute and John to come back. And since they're the invited, see, anybody can ask questions, right? So I'm gonna start with the panelists. If you have a specific question for these invited speakers, see Melinda nudging. So Melinda, go ahead, please.
Sure. So my question is for Chris, and so all of my questions are going to come from the consumer space. How much are you communicating with your end consumer about the local or the domestic production that you're doing?
So by end consumer, you mean the person, for me, my end consumer is usually the grower.
Yeah, not
Right.
business to business. I'm talking B2C. So and
B2C.
yeah.
So we're seeing more and more communication with the end grower. There's obviously that's more of the role of the greenhouse owner, less of my role. But at the same point in time, we're trying to consider how we're building and developing products so that the grower can grow the crop profitably to hit the end consumer, right? I think some of the things that FAR is working on are great, but when I look at and speak to my my grower base and look at the price points that they have to hit to move volume through the retailer and to the consumer's table, some of these things I see as just being so futuristic, right? Because most of the growers are not paid for flavor today. Most of the growers are not paid for these other attributes that sound and look really good. They're paid by ounce, by gram, by whatever. It's back to kind of the old farming mechanism, right? You get paid on weight. And so these other things I think can add value, but the overall market, and I would ask all of you to look at how you grocery shop. You know, when you guys go buy lettuce, how are you buying lettuce? You know, I know my family often buys lettuce based on how easy it is. Like the pre-made salad kits, yeah, it's fast, right? So we spend our money on convenience. Are we necessarily spending our money on flavor? The argument can be made that we're spending our money on flavor, but it's coming in the form of dressing, not in lettuce. So we do try to keep that in consideration. My role is more about thinking about what the price points are and what the cost of goods are so that my growers can be profitable and move towards that future of a higher value product.
I would encourage you to communicate with them about the local or the domestic production because consumers are willing and have a preference for domestic production, and they're willing to pay more for that.
Completely agree. And I think the only problem we're running into is certain crops. We've flooded that market.
Sure.
And now we're moving into a more of a price sensitive space as more and more volume is being produced.
Question back there?
First, a comment about the cucumber production facility seems to be.
That's multiple facilities. So,
Very centralized.
yeah.
So the cost of distribution and maintaining quality is very hard point for consumption. But the first top. My question is related to your mention of salad. So we're talking about in situ processing is one. We're talking about precision. But I rarely come across an integrated model that includes precision processing to address first the output and then the generated waste and loss during these operations. I'd like to hear both of your opinions.
You summarize the question.
Yes. Could you summarize the
I'll let
question?
you do it.
Can you summarize the question for me so I answer appropriately?
Does these models of outputting fresh fruit on the market, but there's a lot of similar things happening already, and there's a lot of waste as a result of it all fresh.
I don't know so we're research funders. We're not a business, right? And our business is funding scientific research. And we do that. And so one way we think that our research that we fund, especially through PIP, impacts businesses is because the businesses that work with us that pay for the research decide what's going to be done. And so we don't focus a lot on the food waste aspects. You know, I'm personally more interested in the phytochemical production from a control of environmental control and how that happens, and then the health aspects that can come from that. So pursuing that in terms of scientific perspective. But yeah, so for our initiatives, we're not handling food waste, at least not in the CEA space.
And I would say from the perspective that I'm working, it's more seed to harvest. The post-harvest aspect, we put this in. I know a lot of my clients are spending a lot of money on trying to improve their processes to reduce waste, to have a better presentation to the client or to the consumer. But for me, I'm more seed to harvest. And my experience has been that the sciences on seed to harvest, while they're important in preparing the plant for post-harvest, there's a whole new set of sciences on the post-harvest side that I don't want to act like I know much about.
You had a comment?
Was at the very beginning of looking at the understanding of the program on transformation of food manufacturing, largely different, and one of the major targets was to decrease food waste as well as efficiency and nutrition, various other advanced food processing benefits.
Nick?
Curious for both of you, in order for some of these initiatives, the research initiatives to make a difference, the growers got to embrace them. And so with all of the university research, government research, private research industry that we're working on, how does that compare to the growers' willingness or appetite to develop proprietary technology in-house? I mean, the majority of the large growers are developing the same technology that you guys are raising money for, trying to put research initiatives towards, right? And so it seems like a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, so for PIP specifically, so for the other project, the integration into regional environments, that's just taking off. And hopefully we'll announce that soon with who our partner is on that. In terms of PIP, we're developing plant varieties that our partners say they want, right? So they want tomato plants that have the right architecture, but that are also very flavorful. And so the potential for, and we have seed companies in that as well. So the potential for those seed companies to market that to other groups, they find value in that. And that's how we decided on doing that, right? All of our, and they're the ones who sell to the growers. We don't do any of that. We fund scientific research, and our scientific research we hope is going to be important that helps growers and everybody else utilize it for their own projects or businesses.
Have you seen it? Have you seen kind of an uptake in companies like Vendera, right, that are getting acquired for some of their proprietary technology to keep it in-house, right? I mean, that's directly competing with that.
So uptake from what we're developing?
Yeah, right. I mean, the large scale commercial growers either acquiring or developing their own seeds, their own breeding technologies in-house for them as a competitive advantage.
Well, we hope that a lot of the technology that comes from what we do is going to be open to the public, right? And you know, with some of the companies, when we work with universities, we have all the regular IP agreements that they have, and they can license it from the universities if that's where that IP exists for that. So we're not trying to compete with businesses. We know that businesses are doing a lot of what we're doing. We want to represent public sector funding with businesses to move that, to advance that forward. So great. Lots of companies want to do this, fine, do it in-house. Are we repeating some of it? I don't think so with everything that we're doing, but that's also fine, right? We're here to serve the public, and they're here to serve their interests.
Yeah, I like to comment on that one as well. I think it's very easy for us to get lost in all the press releases on the big companies only. I think it's also very difficult within this industry to figure out what the exact accessible market size is, because that data, we're not quite a big enough industry where that data is being captured and shared through the traditional sources. But one of the things that I've learned in so many years is we need to look at the market as North America. That's number one. And if you look at the market as North America, there is more acreage of farms that are still family held within CEA than there is acreage of farms that have investment capital. The acreage in the farms that have investment capital happen to be the loudest. There are plenty of acreages of farms that are still family held, and they're still big. You know, you go across the border into Canada, still some very large farms up there that are still family held. If you work around the United States, some of the largest farms are 20, 30 years old. Those farms are just quiet. They're not really looking for some of the attention that comes from, making so much noise. I think the important part is that and really how Horde Americas has managed to exist for 14 years, is that we speak to that quieter audience. We look for those individuals who are just there to focus to run a profitable farm, versus it's safe to say that in order for a lot of these investments coming from either private equity or venture capital, they're not going to be profitable as a farm. There's too much capital to put in. They're going to have to be profitable as an ag tech company in which they develop IP that is then sold to get a return on investment for the investors. So we don't necessarily have to speak to just that group. And I would encourage that when we're putting our mission statements together, that we're not speaking to that group directly, but we're looking at those farms who really are more of a traditional farming model where the owner is the head grower, is the head salesperson, rather than have an entire C-suite of people that, and employ attorneys. Again, acreage wise, if I take 1,000 acres, that only represents 200 of the 1,000 acres. There's equally as many acres and more that don't have that structure.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much, John. We're gonna move on in the program. Thank you very much for the speakers. They make the trip from out of town, and thank you very much. So we're gonna move into the faculty research briefs. So these are 5-minute presentation, and then we have 5 minutes for questions, right? We're gonna give the panel the opportunity to ask first, and then if they don't have any questions, they won't get a drink after, but you guys go after, right? So I wanna introduce Dr. Jackson from the Department of Horticulture, and his work is in substrate engineering and optimization, right?
Thank you, Ricardo. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, that's the teacher in me, so I always expect a response. So in the next 5 minutes, what I'd like to do is share a bit about what my program does, and more importantly, the role that NC State University has played in the past 40 years relative to the development and utilization of soilless growing media for not just horticulture, but a broad range of agricultural commodities. So who are we? So the Horticultural Substrates Laboratory is the only laboratory in North America that solely focuses on the development, engineering, utilization, and diagnostics of soilless growing media of all types for any crop grown in any soilless system. And this was actually started in the 1980s by 4 faculty in the Department of Horticulture, all of whom have now retired. They're sitting on the beach, and now I am left holding the mantle for this. So we do 4 things relative to soilless growing media. And by this, I mean organic, inorganic materials, just all across the board. Is primarily physical properties, hydrological water properties, chemical properties, and biologicals. Now, the bulk of what I do and my lab is built to do is on the physical and the hydrologic side of things. I'll highlight a few things there in just a few seconds. We work more with the growing media manufacturers, from peat producers in Canada to wood fiber, bark, rock wool, perlite, vermiculite, compost, all across the realm, okay? So speaking of, go forward, substrate characterization. One of the things that our lab does or has done is develop or modify new and existing technologies to enhance soilless substrate science. And only in the past 3 to 5 years has substrates been viewed globally as a true science within the realm of horticulture and agriculture. So what that means is even in the dirt world, which we aren't dirt, but you know the point, we're taking advanced technologies to help us see inside as we're engineering and crafting substrates to have very specific functions for very specific crops and cropping systems. And that's where you all, of course, come to play for that. A couple of more things as far as the engineering side of what we do. This is kind of where my passion is, even though I'm not an engineer by training, but we work a lot on peat alternatives and other growing media materials that are locally sourced, primarily forest-based, and North Carolina is a great hub of that. Also with a lot of agricultural and other biomass feedstocks, developing engineering new growing media for the future and to extend peat supplies. Those of you in the growing media world who purchased this, you may already have encountered some stumbling blocks in the last few years as far as product demand. And folks, really quickly, one of the struggles that those in the soilless substrate world, and there are about 5 of us in the entire continent, by the way, who like really focus on soilless substrate. We've never had value. Don't have a farm gate like blueberry, strawberry, raspberry, blackberry Christmas trees, but there's finally now an estimate of how much volume that we produced. Now, this was some work out of Wageningen University. It was just published a couple of years ago, and it basically estimated that in 2017, 67 million cubic meters of growing media were used, and by 2050, it expects to go 400%. Now, many of the reasons why that's increasing is in this room. It's controlled environment agriculture. It's more and more traditionally field-grown soil crops moving into soilless culture, a la fresh, soft fruit. Okay, that's what's driving a lot of this demand, as well as increased production of mushrooms and other crops. So two last slides. Challenges facing us. You all have likely heard of the initiatives around peat-free and peat alternatives. And I do not have time to delve into exactly the science and the facts behind that. But what we do know is this, thinking globally, certainly here in North Carolina and the United States, thanks to either imposed, proposed, or perceived regulatory pressures on peat, the growing media industry globally is really aggressively looking at alternatives and ways to stretch those peat supplies for growing any and all the crops that we have. There are geopolitical crises around the world that could at any moment affect the supply chain of growing media. And that has been made evident by the demand of the pandemic, as well as situations in Sri Lanka, Chile, the UK. I could go on simply as it relates to growing media. And there are many others. And to show you the impact, and this is my last one, this is what's cool, folks. To study substrates and soilless media since I was, a graduate student, I just 10 days ago was a invited panelist for a congressional hearing from the Ag Committee in DC, who assembled myself and 5 others from the Canadian peat producers, Art Van Wingerden, who is the owner of Metrolina Greenhouse here in North Carolina, and the representative of Georgia Mushrooms in Pennsylvania. And we've represented the growing media industry to educate these congressmen on, number one, what is peat moss? Why are there problems getting it out of Canada? And what are the solutions to the future of agriculture as it relates to soilless growing media? So we're now finally in the spotlight and hopefully there to help you all in developing new substrates as we move forward. So what do? Alternatives, a lot of water. I mentioned before hydrological properties of synthetic, alternative, organic, inorganic materials, and designing, engineering, and modeling substrates for any container system. This is gutters, bags, troughs, large containers. We do a lot of modeling for physical properties and drainage. So with that being said, there's a quick snapshot of what our lab does and our team. A lot of you I know work with substrates, so I'm happy to interact and to collaborate however we possibly can, but that's how I fit into this. Thank you.
We have a few minutes for questions.
Oh, wonderful.
We start with the panel and then I will go back there. Anybody in the panel?
Yes. Hello. Very nice presentation, Brian.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you are working. Can you give us a sneak peek of what's the closest that you can find on your testing for closest to peat that can be an alternative?
The most agreed upon raw material globally is wood fiber, engineered wood fiber. And I'll stop there because there could be a lot of explanation as to why that is. But engineered wood fibers are offering the best possible solution to the volume, the demand, and the qualities for crop production.
Anybody else in the panel? Hans?
Yeah. Good presentation. I've seen better from you, but that's okay. So,
Ouch.
we've never met before, so.
We'll never meet
Yeah,
again.
well, So, yeah, quick question. Is there any type of IP generation around engineered wood fiber? And then also, yes, there's the buzzwords of sustainability and regenerative agriculture.
Correct.
How does engineered wood fiber play into, let's, use words like byproducts of existing
Mhm.
commodities, or then carbon footprint and carbon budgeting?
So
That's a lot, I know.
yeah, to summarize that, the IP around engineered wood fibers, there are existing patents, recent patents on this. They're being challenged, and I think some of them will fall. That's my opinion about that. There's too much prior art. Engineered wood fibers have been around since the late 1970s, despite them just being kind of new to our market. The second thing relative to sustainability, they too are being touted like coconut coir and coconut materials to be more sustainable than peat. Well, that's not necessarily a blanket statement. It depends on where you are in the world and what assessments of sustainability you're looking at. So wood fiber can be for us, but we're in the wood basket of the world in the southeastern US. You go to the Midwest or other parts of the world, probably not so much. I know not so much.
A question back there?
Yeah, really appreciate what on the applied side, I'm curious if you approach this kind of industry focus where we mass production throw this in our typical machinery in which generates, small pods sort of thing. Do you dive into that at all? Sort of the application of your research?
Do I dive into the application side? I refuse to do research that's not immediately applicable. So even though it's working with big companies and ideas, it's got to be applicable right out of the gate before I'm going to be interested in my program. It's kind of how we're built around. So it's the basic science backs that up, but it's got to be applicable because it's got to go from the benchtop to commercialization and scalability and volumes of any raw material in the growing media sector for it to ever be viable, except on a really, really, really small regional basis, which there's still value to some of that too. Not yet. Nor should they all, nor should they.
Kelly, question?
Time did not pay me. We've never met before either, but I will say that to Adrian and everybody else here, having been a part of horticulture, agronomy, animal science, and most every facet of agriculture, horticulture leads the way in just what you asked about. More to me than any other group, do they keep their focus on what their growers need, and when it comes out of the department, it's ready to go, or to make sure it doesn't cause a problem. So kudos to you.
Kelly, I want to see you again, huh?
Thank you very much again, Hans. Thank you. Well, that was Brian from the horticulture department, and now we're going to move to Katarina Stapelman from the Department of Nuclear Engineering.
Good afternoon. Yeah, we're switching gears a little here. Now really completely engineering focused. Electrochemical nitrogen fixation. Yeah, I'm a little small, right? Yeah, thank you. I hope you can hear me okay. So I'm working with plasmas for life sciences. What is that? Plasmas are also called the fourth state of matter. It's a partly ionized gas. We see it a lot when we look out at the night sky. The light we see at night is actually plasma. It's the most important component of the universe. We just don't have so much of it on Earth. We do have the polar lights, and we have the lightning strikes. And it has been known for a long time that lightning strikes produce fertilizer in air. So after a thunderstorm, you can see the grass is greener actually. And that's something that I try to do in the lab artificially. So we use plasma, and you can see a plasma setup here. Is it working? Yeah, on the right side. You can see that little glow there. That is the plasma we create in the lab. And we just use air as a process gas, apply a high voltage to the air, and we can create reactive oxygen and nitrogen species very controllably. So we can control them on demand that just by switching on and off the power for the electric field. And we can create a plethora of reactive species. And the one we are focusing on right now is nitrate. So we want to use air, some electricity, produce nitrate, and fix it in water as a nitrogen fertilizer. By tuning the electrical input and the timing between the generation of these reactive species and the delivery to the plants, we can sort of change and adjust the reactive species that we can deliver. So there's an overview of all the different species that can be produced. They can be really a lot. We can have hydrogen peroxide, we can have nitric oxides, atomic oxygen, all kinds of things. But we are really trying to focus on nitrate for now, but we are also looking into impacts of the other species we produce. And how can that now benefit controlled environment agriculture? Well, it's modular. We can just hook it up to the irrigation system or to hydroponic systems. And we can deliver nitrogen fertilizer on demand when it's needed. If you have, for example, a nitrogen sensor, you can really just add the nitrogen on demand by pushing a button. We can also reduce the pH of solutions. That's something we try to avoid when we are working with plants in the field. But as I've learned, it can be beneficial for controlled environment to have something that can control and in particular reduce the pH of the solution. And with that, we also have antimicrobial effects. We have all these reactive oxygen species in there, and they have been shown to have antimicrobial effects. So we can get rid of bacteria, adjust the pH of the solution, and have nitrogen delivery on demand. And what we are looking at here is if it also has growth promoting effects. There's literature out there showing growth promoting effects of this plasma treated water. And we are looking into that as well. So our goal and some results is for now to optimize the devices for nitrate production so we can get the most nitrate per kilowatt hour. And we are interested in maximizing this concentration while also at the same time being able to upscale and have larger volumes of water available that are supplemented with that nitrogen for on-demand use. We are also looking at these other species and their impact on plant growth and antimicrobial effects. And we see some increased stress tolerance of plants, but that's right now still early in the research. So just one example of the research we are doing here. We have, this is now Arabidopsis plants, just as a model plant. We looked at low nitrogen solutions. We have a nitrate control where we provide the exact same amount of nitrate that we also provide with this plasma treated water. And then we have two plasma treated or plasma activated waters, POR 4 and POR 5 on the bottom. And we can see that we can get a similar or better growth as with the nitrate control for POR 4. POR 5, we experimented a little bit with hydrogen peroxide. That was definitely too much hydrogen peroxide in the solution. But if we look at the root length, which we can see on the right as a box plot, we see that the plasma treated water increases the root length of the plants significantly. So even if you don't see it in those pictures that well, the root length definitely increases and the dry weight increases as well. We are looking more into that. We have a project here in the Plant Science Initiative. Yeah, it's a big project, so I don't want to go too much into detail there. We are right now working on tomatoes and hoping to go into corn in the spring. But yeah, there we have a whole 12 PI project looking at this technology from every angle you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the panel?
Hello, Katerina. Very nice presentation. I'm curious to see if you have done any research on the compatibility of the plasma with other nutrients.
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah. So that's something we want to check what happens when we treat nutrient solutions, not just water, but actual nutrient solutions. And we have not looked into interactions between the plasma treated water and nutrient solutions or other soilless systems or even in soil systems, what happens there. We are looking now at microbiome in soil to see how that's interacting with the plasma, but it's a really good point to look at other nutrients. Yeah.
Yes, I'm curious, your grand vision of this technology as it compares to robotics. So do you see it as a big replacement or a small replacement? How does it fit?
I think that's a very, very good question. And Haber-Bosch is really, I mean, that's a process that has been perfectionized for 100 years or so. So I can't come up there and say, hey, my technology is so much better, we just replace everything. What I see, I think the big advantage is that you can have these systems directly attached to greenhouses or sitting on the farm. You can connect it to irrigation systems, and it's really modular. It's local nitrogen production. So you produce nitrogen when you need it, where you need it. You don't have all this transport. You don't have these increasing or falling nitrogen prices that you have to take into account and plan. You don't need to store nitrogen fertilizer. You really just produce it on demand where you need it. You can also combine it. It really just works with electricity. So you can just combine it with solar power or with wind power. And the nice thing is, speaking of renewable energy storage, you can basically use the nitrate production as energy storage, sort of. So when you have excess energy, you can just produce your fertilizer and have it sitting there. So you can make use of the excess energy at that time.
Linda?
Okay, I have a two-part question. So what phase is this at in terms of the applicability to growers? Like, is this technology ready right now to be sold into the private sector and utilized? Or is this just the beginning phase and it's going to take a little bit to be retrofitted and ready for industry usage? And then secondly, what's the stability of this type of technology? Is it because some technologies are really cool and they come out, but they break frequently and or they don't work as they're supposed to. So how long have you been using the technology to test its basically durability?
So the first part, we have a lab prototype. We are still working on upscaling. With the right support from interested industry, I think we could get it ready quickly. The technology is there. We need to work a little bit on upscaling. We have plans how to upscale it. It's just a matter of resources financially and manpower. It's my group there on that picture, but it's not a huge group. So yeah, manpower and just financial resources to upscale it is important. The other thing is durability. So my work is sort of twofolded. I do plasma for life sciences. So I have the plasma agriculture, but I'm also looking at plasma medicine applications. And there are, especially in Europe, companies that have certified medical devices on the market. So they don't break all the time. There's a lot of experience with those devices in this medical arena in Europe. So I would say it's possible to just transfer that knowledge and say, yeah, that's going to be a reliable technology.
Thank you, Katerina, very much. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So now we're going from the Department of Nuclear Engineer to the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineer with Edgar Lobaton, working on image analysis, computer vision, and mechatronics. Edgar, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. A pleasure to talk about it. So I'll be talking a little bit about some of the research that we do related to visual processing, computer vision, machine learning, AI, all of that, and a little bit of robotics in there too. So two big themes I'm going to touch in here. One of them is going to be microscopy in general and some things that we do related to that. And then the other theme is more at the plant phenotyping type of level, so much larger scale. Right. So for the first portion of it, this will be mostly a showcase of activities because the technology and the tools are basically very similar throughout. One of the applications that we're working on is this microscopy image where we're identifying different types of cotton tip fibers, right? So the idea is that we want to identify different species, different types, as you can see in here. And in general, like this tells us something about the quality of the textiles at the end of the day. So, this is something that we did and as a quick collaboration with some people from crop science. And then the idea is trying to minimize basically the amount of data and effort in trying to create some models such as the ones that I'm showing right over here, right? So the AI is capable of course, of identifying all these tips very quickly, but in general, we want to be able to do this by reducing the amount of effort that goes into the annotation. So here's another very quick one. This actually illustrates a little bit of the robotics that we do also in here. So in this particular one, this is mostly for biological purposes, but we've been looking at identifying microscopic fossils and then doing some sort of sorting. But I've been talking to people about different type of applications, of how we transfer these technologies to some of the crop science or agricultural type of applications as well too. The idea is that we want to be able to identify different things, microscopic level again, and be able to do segmentation like the images that you see over there to identify something about the morphology. So we're able to learn all of these things in real time. And we've been building a microscopic system to be able to handle some of those samples as well too. So I'm not going to bother you too much on the details because there's a lot of like mechanical pieces in there. But essentially, at the end of the day, we want to be able to identify, manipulate all of these and have basically the AI in the loop for in real time kind of identifying things. We've been working with people to do these kind of things also at a much larger scale, basically with like sweet potatoes, right? So this is kind of the other extreme, right, at the microscopic level. The other more phenotype type of work, for example, is related to identifying drought stress levels for different type of crops. And this is one for soybean. So here we're looking at wilting levels. So experts are actually doing the annotation for us, and we're trying to learn the basically like the different classification models. But one key thing in here related to what I was mentioning before is that we're trying to reduce the amount of effort that goes into the annotation. And we're also trying to learn basically what the AI is actually seeing in here to make some of those decisions, right? So key things here is that we actually created a model, and won't go into the details of the model, but basically we try to use a model that is not necessarily just looking at the full image as a black box, but it's trying to identify which piece of the image is actually helpful for determining basically wilting happening in here, right? So what the model ends up learning is that it learns to ignore, for example, things like the dirt, or things like the background, or things that are too far away to be able to tell wilting. And it tells us that nearby images, for example, of the leaves with a specific type of like the wilting, then those are the ones that it's going to use for the decision, right? So all of that was done without having to have people basically highlighting every single one of the regions on the images, which is a very painful process, as you can imagine. Yeah, in general, lastly, I wanted to highlight some of the things that we're doing for data fusion. We're fusing information, not only from the visual side of things, a lot of computer vision there, of course, but also things related to electrophysiology and fusing some of that information. So we have several collaborators, I guess a couple of collaborators here as well too, that are working on that. With the 3D vision portion of it, we're looking at some of the things related to intensities, I guess, and reflectance properties of the leaves to be able to identify like drought stress, but also looking at phenotype characteristics from 3D reconstructions of, let's say, maize in this particular case. And yeah, so golden opportunities, of course, we have all these technologies that we're developing, and we're being very interested in actually transferring these to different type of use cases and expertise, of course, in things related to how we actually transfer this and how do we try to do it without having to go through a very huge effort on trying to annotate the data. And I think I'm just going to leave it right there. Thanks.
Thank you, Edgar. We're going to move to the panel first. Marie, please.
I'm Fred. Very nice to meet you.
Nice.
Many of the computer vision is dedicated always looking at the upper canopy. Are you focusing? One of the challenges that that we are looking is we want to get into the roots problem. So I'm looking for solutions for trying to do phenotyping for the roots, either in the soil or in the water. And and then a second question about that, the microscopy level. I'm very familiar with some technology that is out there for some pathogens. Also, if you're looking that into a water microscopic level too as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, good questions. So we haven't done anything specifically for roots for these type of applications, but we have done some other work before where we had to do segmentation from, I don't know, MRIs and X-rays, for example. In the case of MRIs, you're looking at vessels, like for people and things like that. So the technology is very similar in those cases too. So I know people that have done imaging like in ground, right, like doing different type of like sensors in there, ultrasound and so on and so forth. So that can be used, right? Like, so I guess specifically we haven't done it, but I know it's feasible to be able to do all of that. And then at the water level, not yet. We haven't really looked into that too much. So if the opportunity arises, then definitely we'll be interested.
Anybody else from the panel? Nick?
How do you think that the commercial viability of using machine learning or image recognition to determine drought stress compared to just looking at reflectance like NDVI?
Yeah, so one of the models that we're actually using is using the derived quantity from NDVI for that purpose. What we're trying to see is that we're trying to figure out, so this is basically an index that was derived based on expertise and all of this, right? But we're trying to see how machine learning and data mining in general can actually try to identify maybe a variant of those indicators that can actually be a little bit more robust depending on the use case that you have, right? So if you have something in more control setting where maybe like you're looking at slightly different bands of frequency, or you have basically hyperspectral imaging, for example, then the idea is that maybe we can learn a new index that is very specific to you and it actually works really well for you in the control setting.
I think that's where the value is, right? Especially for the industry, a lot of those indexes, I mean, there's like only 5 of them that would work in controlled ag because you don't have the right light, right? And so I think that's where you can supplement it with machine learning. Really shows the strong results.
Yes, exactly. And what happens a lot is that we may train some of these models and they work well in one particular setting, but then you take it in a different setting and it just doesn't work all of a sudden, right? So often we need to do what is called like transfer learning, right? Figure out how to fine tune those models. And that's some of the things that we worked on. So, thank you.
Anybody else with a question?
Getting into the technical side of things, really cool work.
Thanks.
Are you doing like pre-processing of images like with MATLAB, like adjusting for particular contrast?
Yeah.
You don't need to dive into the really technical.
Sure.
I guess how this works exactly.
Yeah. So at the high level, I guess I would say we have the images. We do some sort of maybe pre-processing ahead of time, right? So it could be like contrast normalization or anything like that. Then we go into this pipeline that is the feature extraction. I guess that's something that we get to learn. And then we kind of train the classifier, which is the neural network machine learning portion of that, right? And then we get the output out of that. So that's a general pipeline. If we're trying to output something that is not classification, like maybe different labels, then we produce basically some sort of output and maybe we do some post-processing at the end of the day. So MATLAB, is becoming very good at doing a lot of these things right like now, but usually like the state-of-the-art techniques are actually mostly in Python or C++. So we end up using a lot of Python for that initially. But yeah, hope that answers the question.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Edgar, very much. Great. So now we're moving to the Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics, and we have Daniel Tregilli. Sorry.
Bless you.
Yeah, bless you. Economics of specialty crops in controlled environment. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ricardo. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm very grateful to have been invited today. My name is Daniel Tregilli, and I am an assistant professor and extension specialist in the Ag Econ department. I'll be talking a little bit about how Ag Econ is fitting into this picture here. Just to begin, we have a relatively small team and we're relatively new to this controlled environment agriculture space. We've been working sort of really for about a year in it now, as part of the PIPCAP team that Ricardo mentioned earlier, so that strawberry propagation. So we have myself, I focus on specialty crop economics, and my colleague, Dr. Heidi Schweitzer, who focuses on supply chain economics. And then we have our 2 wonderful graduate students who are here today as well. So we are, unlike the previous presenters, not the fun scientists, we're the dismal scientists. Ricardo loves us. He comes with amazing ideas, cool technologies, and we say, is it going to work? Is anyone going to buy it? At what cost? I don't know. So I'm mainly here with questions rather than answers today. So economics, we're interested in decision making. We're looking at individual decision making, the choices they make at the firm level, and then how those decisions aggregate up to market level impacts. And so the controlled environment agriculture, as a increasingly widespread technology, is a hotbed for questions along these lines. We're kind of interested in, like, for instance, how is the cost of production going to change if people adopt more controlled environment agriculture? That's going to affect their profitability and their likelihood of adopting some of these technologies that are being presented. How is the timing and location of production going to change? For instance, in the strawberry case, it's very specialized, very geographically, but with the controlled environment system, it could be dispersed around the country, and that would then change the supply chain resilience, the bottlenecks, the risks involved. So rather than having it all being done at a single location where a bad year might just wipe out, for instance, the strawberry nursery production, if it was in many little units around the country, it's far more risk stable. Then the questions are around industrial organization. So what would the structure of the industry look like? Are we going to see sort of increasing consolidation and fewer larger firms as the capital requirements increase? Will we, on the other hand, see more modular systems that can be adopted by small farmers and used in the existing technologies? As Dr. Knuth was mentioning earlier, how is consumer demand going to play into this? Is the consumer's interest in local production going to be offset, for instance, by a dislike of, say, a more artificial environment than natural production? We've seen real pushback in other crops regarding like a more technological intervention. If you've kind of seen the stigma that grew up around DE crops in fruit and vegetables, it has not seen the widespread adoption. And then finally, how is government policy going to influence all of these questions? So, for instance, the federal government generally hasn't supported specialty crops nearly as much as row crops and commodities, but they are offering like whole farm insurance to cover fruit and vegetable growers. If the industry becomes more consolidated, are they likely to kind of keep those insurance programs in place, or might they sort of step back from them, feeling that large companies can look after themselves? So many interesting questions and very little work done in this area. I checked our flagship journal from the Agricultural and Applied Economics Association, could not find a single mention of controlled environment in this kind of context. So we're pretty lucky to be in this space at the beginning of things, at least from our profession's perspective. So we're currently working with Ricardo and Dr. Hoffman and others on this PIPCAP grant. Our key objectives will be answering some, but not all of those questions. First, we want to be comparing the costs of conventional strawberry nursery production versus CEA style production based on the experiments that the scientists are running. Then forecasting what that might do for adoption of these technologies. We're also mapping out the supply chain in the existing system and then putting all those pieces together to say, how might that supply chain change? What was that going to do for resilience? What's that going to do for the timing and availability of these products at different times of the year? And then how that might change also the industrial organization. So I was asked to kind of come up with an ask because we've got all these industry members here, and my ask is more information, basically. What are you as an industry really interested to know? And I was grateful for Chris's talk earlier, raising some of the kind of the key issues in this sector. But I'm curious, what are your priorities? What are, from your perspective, the gaps in the economic knowledge that would be valuable for you as you look and do your own strategic planning? And then finally, a specific ask possibly could be looking at data sharing opportunities. Of course, all of that IP stuff that Ricardo was talking about earlier would have to be considered, but we would definitely find that interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Excellent. Any questions from the panel? Aaron?
You mentioned that you are doing these comparisons from CA versus conventional. Are you
Yes.
separating CA greenhouse and vertical farming?
So unfortunately, we don't have a commercial system. We can't kind of compare apples directly to apples. So Ricardo and his collaborators are putting this together in a lab style environment. And we're trying to figure out the costs of production in that lab environment, make some kind of educated guesses about what might change from the lab to the commercial environment. to make that sort of comparison.
Just going to tell you that the vertical farming cost on energy, for example, it's going to be higher than the greenhouse. So separation in that, it's very important.
Absolutely, yes. And basically, like from the conventional system in the field, you're kind of substituting land for energy. I think the far slides pointed that out really nicely at the beginning.
Yeah, you had mentioned that there's a lot unknown in the controlled environment, economic modeling, and not a lot of information. What are some of the challenging spots for it? So where is there a lot of information lacking that could really help you build out these models or have a better understanding of how robust this industry is?
Great question. The short answer is pretty much all of it. I mean, publicly. So I think many of the companies represented here and elsewhere will have a good sense of their own costs of production. But in terms of things that we as external researchers can look at, there isn't much data going through the traditional sources. One of the previous speakers said that. So in 2017, the Census of Agriculture did start to ask questions about controlled environment agriculture. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in 2022, what that data says. And so we'll start to get a better sense of who's using this, what crops are is it being used for, what are the characteristics of the operators using these crops, using these technologies. Of course, that is, I'm not sure how well we can distinguish between like a vertical farming operation versus a greenhouse versus a high tunnel. I'm not sure what the statistics say for that. But at this point, really, any information is good information.
Question right here.
Kilograms per meter squared of a greenhouse facility,
Mm.
and that sidewalk production space exceeding area versus grow space in particular. So I think there's, and that can be extrapolated out to like any part of the growing process. I'm curious how you see that.
That's a really interesting question. Don't have an answer for you. I think it's something we have to get our heads around, because traditionally you'd say yield is tons per acre or something, quantity per acre. Here you're going to have a greenhouse of maybe square meter or something, but it's far denser. I'm going to take that on notice, but I don't have an answer for you. Great question.
Excellent. Well,
All
thank
right,
you, Daniel,
thank you.
very much. Yeah. So we're getting to the last speaker for the faculty briefs, and then we go to the 2-minute rapid fire for students. And after that, there's a reception up in the hallway, and there is adult juice also. So make sure to stay and have a drink, okay? And my pleasure to introduce Dr. Brennan O'Connor from the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering, talking about organic photovoltaics and greenhouse integration. Thank you, Brennan.
All right, thanks, Ricardo, for the invitation, and thanks everyone to come and listen to some recent research from my group and others. I guess I use this. Yes, okay, success. So as Ricardo just mentioned, I'm from Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering, and the topic we've been looking at lately has been solar power integrated greenhouses, with the ultimate goal of trying to reduce the energy footprint of greenhouses. And so we sort of use this term greener houses to try to capture that. So this research was really initiated through an NSF grant that brought a bunch of researchers together from across 3 different colleges. Ricardo mentioned the colleges across the university and a range of departments too. So we have physics here, civil engineering, myself in mechanical engineering, Cheryl and the phytotron, and Heike and the plant and microbial biology. So it's a good example, I think, of sort of trying to bring together these different disciplines to try to tackle some problems related to controlled environmental agriculture. And so, myself being a mechanical and aerospace engineer, my expertise is more in the solar energy and energy system side, not necessarily plants. So I need a lot of help from Carol. I've learned a lot, and from Heike, et cetera, and Ricardo, which we leaned on quite a bit, although he should probably be listed here too, unofficial advisor. So anyways, so the bottom graph here, it's kind of hard to see for some of these screens, but it really tries to illustrate we're going from all the way from chemistry through the engineering to the economics to try to cover this entire portfolio of things that are necessary to understand the success of solar power integrated greenhouses. And the idea is, if we maybe if I can skip ahead a slide. So agrivoltaics is sort of a growing popular topic, right, for ag, and sort of this idea of integrating solar panels with agriculture. And this can take the form of, outdoor ag, where you have these panels, the picture on the left is sort of this full coverage outdoor ag to greenhouses that have solar panels covering part of the structure. And this has been, the outdoor ag is somewhat successful. The control environment stuff has not been shown to be terribly successful, partly because you're just blocking out too much light. And so this example here where they built this system, I think this is somewhere in the Netherlands, Western Europe. They were trying to grow onions, and I think they had a significant yield loss, so it became not economical to do that. And so our idea is to really try to introduce semi-transparent solar cells to let light through that the plants, so you can get the light up enough to continue to grow plants, but sort of manage the sunlight to really pull out what the plants don't necessarily need to generate power, while also managing the environment of the greenhouse. And so hopefully fully utilize that sunlight and continue to successfully grow crops. And so again, we're using this technology called organic solar cells. I don't want to necessarily dwell on this, but the idea is that, I don't know if you guys know OLEDs, like OLED displays, OLED phones, that's an organic. And so this would just be the corollary. Instead of adding electricity to get light out, we're getting light in to generate power. But they're made up of these organic molecules. And what's really nice about this is that you can synthesize these organic molecules to have different colors, different transparencies. And so you can really tune the color spectrum of this solar power to complement what the plant wants. They're also lightweight, flexible, and have pretty good efficiencies to actually generate some power. So we utilize the phytotron that Ricardo brought up to actually have these mock solar panels. There's a bunch of letters there. They just mean a different organic solar cell materials. You can clearly see the different colors though, and there are different transparencies. We use the grow chambers at the phytotron to look at how the plants respond underneath these essentially mock solar cells. And at least for lettuce, they grew pretty well. And one of the filters, it worked in terms of fresh weight just as well as no filter at all. So beyond that, though, we want to look at energy savings and if there's an actual economic benefit for these structures. And so here we turn to some energy balance modeling where our work came into play a little bit more. And Ishwar will be talking about a little bit more in his lightning talk, who was a PhD student with me, now postdoc with Ricardo, and try to look at the energy balance model with some crop production modeling to really look at how much energy could be produced, what would be the plant response. And this graph is very busy on the right, so I won't necessarily go into the details since my red balloon came up. But I'll just say the zeros on this graph essentially mean zero energy. The solar panels produce as much energy as the system requires, and zero on the bottom means you have the same yield of a conventional greenhouse. And so you can see that some of these systems actually meet those metrics where we can have net zero energy greenhouses and still maintain yield. So with that, just expanding this vision, we're actually looking at really how to control the glazing through different technology and material science to really improve the energy efficiency of these things and connect it to sensors within the greenhouse to have a sort of a dynamic system to minimize energy and maintain or even improve crop productivity. So with that, thank you, and yeah.
Questions for your panel, Nick, please? Great presentation.
Thank you.
Do you think, have you done any work with vertical or warehouses?
No, we haven't, and I'd be happy to look into that more. My understanding, and I don't know the systems well enough, maybe I could be educated, and this would be a good venue for that, is that the energy consumption is really high, right? And So we're hoping that the augmented using sunlight, potentially supplemental lighting, but taking advantage of as much sunlight as we can to reduce the energy consumption is better than just blocking out all sunlight and having all artificial light. But that's more of a hypothesis than actually we have data to prove that.
I think that there's an opportunity. I mean, if you could program the organic photovoltaic to be more receptive to the grow lights that are vertical, that you could then power the sensors in there, right? Not necessarily power the whole farm, but one of the big challenges with indoor farms is the wiring that goes along with all of these sensors, right? You could eliminate the wiring through self-powered organic photovoltaic that was tailored to that grow system, like those grow lights.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Right?
that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good application. And organic solar cells there's a few startups in the field, but one of the potential applications people talk about is indoor power generation. So it actually perfectly matches what you're suggesting. Yeah, cool. That's a good idea. I'm going to write that down.
Any other questions for Benny? Mike?
Yeah, that's a good question. Did you read the papers? So the electrodes have actually a natural low emissivity characteristic. So they almost act like low E coatings. Like you would have a low E coating on a building to reduce overheating and to reduce heat loss during the winter. So it actually improves reduces the energy losses in the system as well, just inherently. Yeah, good question.
Okay, well, thank you, Brendan. Excellent. So that concludes the faculty briefs. So we move into the rapid fire research presentations by postdocs and grad students. And we're going to start with Eshwar, and he's going to talk about using mathematical modeling to accelerate research output. Oh, I am.
So give faculty a job and full, complete information on how to do it. They'll screw it up every time. My name is Deborah Thompson. My role for the College of Ag and Life Sciences is Research Partnership Development, and I am already out of time. We're going to keep you a little late. It will be worth it. I promise. We're going to do 4 very quick pitches from our students and postdocs. These are rapid fire. They get 2 minutes each. There will be no questions until the very end. And since we are holding you a little late, we're going to do rapid fire through the panel only. I promise you they will be happy to answer your questions during the networking with, what did you call it, Ricardo? The grown-up juice? A joke? Okay, so it is my pleasure to introduce Eshwar. The title of Eshwar's presentation is Using Mathematical Modeling to Accelerate Research Output. Eshwar, you have 2 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. Rising global population is a challenge. It's put severe stress on our food production systems, and hence there is a need to move towards more sustainable agriculture solutions. Now, over the past couple of decades, researchers have invested a lot of time and effort into developing clean energy technology for food production, some of them being solar power integration, agrivoltaic farms, etc. At NC State, as part of my PhD and postdoctorate phase right now, I've been looking at developing crop energy and growth models that assess how the change in microclimate under these agrivoltaic systems can impact crop growth. The objective here is we want to make sure that any upcoming new technology is economically viable on a large scale. And so as you can look on this slide, I started off by developing a microclimate energy model, where for the plants, we look at the impact of various ambient conditions such as light, temperature, CO2, and calculate what its temperature and energy requirements are going to be by doing an energy balance accounting for your various heat transfer mechanisms. And this model is suitable not just for your open field systems, but also for greenhouses and agrivoltaic PV farms. Not just for energy and crop microclimate, we have also developed crop growth models. So these are biological functional modeling systems that make use of your ambient conditions such as temperature, CO2, light. But now they can model your rate of change in photosynthesis and account for very crop specific parameters such as your specific leaf area, crop respiration losses, etc., and can give you very accurate modeling of yield as a function of time. And this yield can be divided into various important parameters such as fruit, leaves, stems, and flowers. And we have used this model in a very versatile manner to model a lot of popular vegetative crops such as lettuce, tomato, wheat, and also recently cannabis. Thank you.
The next presentation is by Sam Humphreys. The title of Sam's presentation is Revolutionizing Strawberry Propagation with Controlled Environments. Go ahead, Sam.
Hi, I'm Sam Humphrey. Thanks for having me here. All right, so many of us here have been to a plant propagation class, but for those of you who haven't, we start off in the semester with one single plant, and you take off a piece of the plant, you plant it, and then by the end of the semester, you hopefully have 2 plants. Now strawberry propagation is just like this. Strawberry propagation is just like this. Now, I'm so sorry. All right. Now imagine you just started your job at a strawberry nursery and you get in, and you've been to your plant propagation class, and they tell you from one single plant, you'll produce over 100,000 plants. You'd say that's impossible, right? That's a huge number. But that's exactly what these strawberry nurseries do. They take a small number of plants, and over about 4 or 5 years, they produce over 1 million. However, this takes a lot of land, a lot of labor, and there are many disease issues in the system. So these strawberry nurseries are seeking solutions. Our research team was recently granted by the USDA $5.3 million to study ways that we can improve the strawberry propagation system using controlled environments. Now, this is a collaboration between scientists from 12 different institutions. We have many little sub-teams. So alongside our controlled environment physiology team, we also have a genetics team, an economics team, and an extension team that works with industry partners to supplement our controlled environment research into strawberries. Now, the controlled environment portion of this, right now in the Hernandez lab, we're working on carbon dioxide enrichment. We're working on light spectrum and light intensity and light duration. We're even using intra-canopy lighting to try to improve the efficiency of this system and make technologies that most benefit the people in the industry. I also want to note that this is the first time this much funding and this much energy has been devoted to controlled environment strawberry propagation. So it's a very exciting project. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Shannon Shee. The title of Shannon's presentation is Photoautotrophic Tissue Culture to Benefit Biotechnology Applications. Go ahead, Shannon.
So what would you do if I hand you an early born baby right now? Besides panicking first, you'd probably think to put the baby in an incubator with adequate nutrition and protection from the germs. In biotechnology, we do the same to plant tissues, so-called tissue culture. And the picture in the left-hand side is actually a tiny incubator we use for those plant tissues. But this tissue culture environment does not favor plant to perform photosynthesis due to very high humidity and much limited carbon dioxide. The problem is those plants are more likely to fail when they transition from the inside of the vessel to outside. So this is where my research comes in. I want to create an environmental called photoautotrophic tissue culture where the plant tissues solely rely on the carbohydrates that produced by photosynthesis. So I remodeled the tiny incubator. I added special filters on the vessels so that they could reduce the humidity and increase carbon dioxide to facilitate photosynthesis. By doing this, this system has proved to promote plant growth and development from shoot elongation all the way to transition into outdoor environment. Besides that, I also replaced the medium with rock wool and only kept nutrients in it so that it could reduce the chemical and materials cost of tissue culture. So right now, pretty much like bringing up human babies, I'm able to achieve bring them up, bring the delicate plant tissues into a self-sufficient, healthy plant materials. Thank you.
And our final 2-minute picture for today is Shanae Otley. The title of Shanae's presentation is Automated Stress Severity Scoring Using Machine Learning and Computer Vision.
Good afternoon. So efficient identification of abiotic and biotic stress is a prominent issue that causes the economy billions of loss due to crop losses. And this is suspected to be a increasing burden. So existing mitigation techniques and breeding strategies rely on visual assessment of plants to detect stress. However, they can benefit from automating the process of stress detection, the ability to grade consistently, and preventing stress progression using machine learning. Advances in machine learning demonstrate potential to improve accuracy and repeatability in high throughput sensing and phenotyping of crops grown in controlled environments. Now, this is what, with such advances, I am working on developing a automated and efficient machine learning approach to quantify or estimate stress severity, as well as predict the occurrence or stress symptoms before visible symptoms occur. Now, this, I'm sorry, yeah, so the tools provided, I am using images coupled with machine learning to estimate stress regions on the leaf surface and to identify features that could be used to as early stress indicators among the plants. Now, this is important and could be, the tools provided could be used for estimating stress severity, as well as forecasting the occurrence or change in stress. This research could provide a roadmap to early stress detection, as well as estimating early stress detection. And the goal is to have a method or the information provided to be used to optimize resources within a controlled environment, as well as monitor epidemics as assess treatment strategies. Thank you.
So thank you so much to my 2-minute pitchers, and I'm missing Sam and where's Shannon? Let's bring them all up. Okay, rapid fire. Nick, do you have one question for one of our pitchers, one or more?
Ashwin, how long does it take you to bring on a new variety?
New variety of a crop model.
Yeah, with a high degree of confidence.
So the high rate of confidence comes from experimental results. So in general, if I can rely on literature or existing experimental results, I can get you a new model within a week. Yeah.
Shauna, which plants are you working on right now?
So I'm mainly working on cannabis on this photoautotrophic culture. Yeah, that's like the start line for us right now.
Yeah, for Shauna. So in the mantra of making things faster, cheaper, easily convertible, you showed us two examples.
Right.
Are the photoautotrophic plants, do they have an increased growth rate? If not, what are some ways that you can manipulate plant growth rate to increase it so you can have a product prepared sooner?
Right. So for the photoautotrophic culture, it does. So if you only compare the biomass, it does not it is not better than the sugar medium since the sugar is already provided in the sugar medium that like in the others example. But the other important parameter that we are looking at is the internode or the number of nodes is actually more in the photoautotropic culture because the nodes is the materials that we're going to use, at least in cannabis micropropagation, is the material we use to propagate more plants. So from that perspective, it has its benefits. And plus, the other beneficial point is that in photoautotropic culture, it's not very clear in the picture, but the plant already developed roots compared to the traditional tissue culture. As we're familiar, you need to go through another rooting process, like for another month or so. So we eliminate that process as well.
This is for Shuar, and Nick actually stole my question there. But if you don't have information, you know, what it meant, how much it meant in order to develop that information to create that model, as accurate as getting the information.
So I worked with different experimental data. So some of the most detailed data that I worked with are from growers in Yuma, Arizona, where they gave me an entire year of crop growth information for iceberg lettuce. And so my model, I can say, is extremely precise now in determining that if you increase your average annual temperature in Arizona by 1 degree, what's going to be your change in harvest dates, right? It can be that accurate in predicting. But generally, when I rely on data from literature, usually the data points are just the final harvest. So I'm often missing out on how the plants are actually growing. So more recently in my cannabis experiments, my collaborators have given me more than enough data points to kind of make that curve very accurate as well. So just giving you some of the pointers here. Yeah.
That concludes the formal program. Let's thank the 2-minute pitchers once again. Our panelists and presenters from near and far. We have, please feel free to ask any of our presenters, especially our 2-minute pitchers, any questions. We do have posters up on the landing on the left, grown-up juice, and I'm gonna close it. Thanks, guys, for coming. Appreciate it.